I've got a roundup of all the news from the international break. Some key players are either back in training, and we've also had some that have missed training. I'm going to give you an update on that. I've got the key projections, including expected points, the best players for captains, clean sheet odds, projected goals, likelihood of scoring for each player. I've got all of that data for you. This video is the ultimate preview for Game Week 4. So I thought I'd start off by giving a roundup of some news from the international break. Now, we have had some key injuries to some important players, I would suggest, in FPL, some of which are, I guess, high-owned players in the game. Others are not necessarily high-owned in FPL, but might well impact other popular players in the game. So first up, we're looking at Martin Odegaard, who unfortunately picked up an ankle injury while on international duty for Norway. I've seen the reports. They suggest he's going to be out for 2 to 3 weeks, which is obviously a couple of FPL game weeks. Now, I don't think Martin Odegaard is all that popular in FPL right now. I mean, if you have him, you're probably best to sell him at this point. But I think the important thing with Odegaard is to analyse how that impacts other players. And the one player I've got at the top of my mind that it could well impact is Kai Havertz. Kai Havertz has obviously been playing the number 9. His class as a forward in FPL, and at 8, I think he's 8.1 million in the game at the moment. He's really popular. And I would just think, naturally, if I was Arteta, the way I would replace Odegaard in the 11 would be to drop Kai Havertz a bit deeper and play someone like Jesus up front. I think that's probably what's going to happen with Arsenal, which obviously if you're a Kai Havertz owner, that's going to have a knock-on effect to your potential FPL points. So just one thing to consider there with the Odegaard injury. And of course, beyond that, Arsenal also have Declan Rice, who is suspended. And they're playing Tottenham and then Man City in their subsequent 2 fixtures. So Declan Rice will obviously be back for the Man City game. But Tottenham at I think it's the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, isn't it? Not the White Hart Lane now. You know, I would question, they're probably going to concede in that game now as a result of all of those changes, in my mind. I wouldn't be surprised if they still won it, but I don't think they're going to keep a clean sheet there. Just my opinion, but I think all of those, you know, suspensions, injuries, etc. will impact them. Next up, I don't think this player is massively popular, but Mosquera of Wolves, who is a 4 million defender option. He got injured playing for Colombia, so just one thing to bear in mind there. Nathan Ake picked up what looked like quite a serious muscular injury while he was playing for the Netherlands. He was stretchered off with that one. Obviously, that's really bad news for Nathan Ake and Man City. I'm not trying to turn an injury into a positive, so don't take this out of context, but it could be good, I guess, for maybe Guardiola owners because there are less options of players that can play at left back. But also it could be a good thing for Rico Lewis owners as well, because Lewis can also play right and left back. And with Kyle Walker coming back into the fray, you know, that was a risk. That was always a risk to Rico Lewis's minutes, right? But he can now play in the team at left back in my mind with Kyle Walker there. So I think this Ake injury kind of has an all-round impact on that Man City defence. You know, possibly good, bad for Guardiola or Rico Lewis. Ezri Konsa, he came off with an injury for England. It does look like a knock though, and if he does miss Game Week 4, he should be back for Game Week 5. It doesn't look all that serious. Arsenal with another injury. Another one that doesn't look all that serious is to Calafiori. Whether he plays Game Week 4 or not too sure, but it doesn't look like he's going to be out for a long time. But that's 3 players, I guess, that are technically missing from maybe Arsenal's first choice 11 now, so just bear that in mind. And then one popular player that caught some eyes in terms of being called up for the Brazil squad, João Pedro. He only played 45 minutes across the 2 games for Brazil on the international break, and he should be back in Brighton. And I would say probably ready to start in Game Week 4. You know, he's gotten off away with things without being injured. I believe someone was tracking his jet on Twitter that he was flying home on. And it looked like basically a couple hours after the game, he was on the plane home. So I think he should be fine to go for Game Week 4. So that's a bit of a roundup there of all the updates we've got from the international break. Next up, there are a few updates resulting for some training footage and pictures that have been shared throughout the week as well. Number 1, Ollie Watkins, he has been missing from all of the Aston Villa training footage we have seen so far. So just one thing to bear in mind, there could potentially be an injury there to Ollie Watkins. Phil Foden and Rodri are back in training for Man City now. Obviously, Phil Foden missed a couple of weeks with illness. Rodri has technically not been match fit for a little while, obviously coming back from the Euros a bit late. So yeah, they're both back in training. I think Rodri being back is good for Man City. Don't think many people are going to have him in FPL. And Foden being back, he's obviously a good FPL option. I think he's a nice differential too. He's back in training. Does that mean he's going to start? I don't think you can be 100% sure that he does start for Game Week 4, but it's just good news in general, right, that he's back in training. And then Cole Palmer was flagged at some point, obviously dropped out of the England squad with an injury, in inverted commas. He was back in training for Chelsea this week as well. So some positive updates with regards to Foden, Rodri and Palmer. And then it doesn't look like Ollie Watkins has trained for Aston Villa so far. Stand by for press conferences on Friday afternoon. And I will also do a Friday afternoon stream at 4 PM UK time, where I go through my final thoughts for the game week. And I'll basically do a roundup of all of the key news from all of the press conferences and any last minute news, etc., to get you ready for that final deadline stream that I'll be doing Saturday morning. So that's a roundup of all the international break and sort of training updates we've had so far. All right, I wanted to just quickly go through the top players for expected points for Game Week 4 by position, because I think it's important just to understand who the top projected players are. And I've used the Fantasy Football Hub expected points algorithm for this. You can find a link if you want to see this data for yourself week on week. It tracks all the way up until Game Week 38, basically. If you want to see this data for yourself, sign up to Fantasy Football Hub. There's a link in the description below. I actually get you 50% off a sign up to Fantasy Football Hub if you're interested. Goalkeepers wise, we've got Ederson, Martinez, Alisson, Raya, Verbruggen, Henderson and Leno as your top keepers, with Ederson coming out on top, closely followed by Martinez. Both goalkeepers heavily backed to keep a clean sheet with their respective fixtures. I'd say Martinez probably a little bit more likely to get saved. But yeah, those are your top goalkeepers for Game Week 4. Defenders up next, and well, the list is dominated basically by Liverpool and Man City players. Robertson is actually ahead of Trent just in terms of expected points, 5.5 versus 5.4. Guardiola also on 5.4, Virgil van Dijk 4.5, Ruben Diaz and Akanji both on 4.5, and Lewis Dunk on 4.2. Some of these fixtures are actually a little bit wrong. Bear in mind, Liverpool play Nottingham Forest at home and Man City have Brentford at home, so forgive the fixtures I've spoken about there. Next up, in terms of midfielders, Salah leads the way, 8.4 expected points, followed by Eze, Saka, Kevin De Bruyne, Diogo Jota, Son, and Luis Diaz again. So I don't know what's happened there with the fixtures. Jota obviously has Nottingham Forest at home. Nice to see Eze really high up in terms of expected points. I do expect him to have a good time against Leicester, especially at Selhurst Park. Salah's obviously the top midfielder. He'll probably be the top midfielder every week. Interesting to see Saka up there as well. Now, he's fit and back in training. I'd expect to see Palmer rise the ranks as well. At the time that I did this screenshot, he was still flagged in the Fantasy Football Hub / FPL systems, so he wasn't quite that high for expected points, but I would expect to see Palmer in and around the top 2 or 3 players there for expected points as well. But yeah, these guys are your top midfielders. In terms of the forwards, we've got Haaland, Isak, João Pedro, Havertz, Chris Wood, Nicholas Jackson, and Mateta as your top forwards. I don't think there's too much more to be said there, really. I think these expected points figures go by kind of what's in my head, really. The only thing, given the Odegaard injury, that might have a knock-on impact into exactly where Kai Havertz plays for Arsenal. I mean, yeah. We don't know exactly what Arteta's thinking about that one, but I just, in the back of my mind, think Kai Havertz, you know, he has the ability to play in midfield, right? I still feel like he's a midfielder first. I don't really know, but the whole reason they bought him in my mind is for his flexibility in terms of being able to play different positions. I think with Odegaard being out, Kai Havertz could drop a little bit deeper, which would obviously have an impact on his predicted points. But yeah, just something to bear in mind. Other than that, though, these are your top forwards. All right, so this data is courtesy of Rob T FPL on X, formerly obviously Twitter. Rob T FPL does a really fantastic job of taking spread betting market data and converting it into things that are useful for FPL. I always say this, and you probably get bored of me saying this if you've watched any of my videos where I talk through these projections, but betting companies, gambling companies, betting markets, etc., for me, are the single best source of projected outcome data you can get, because they invest the most money in the projection algorithms, because ultimately they want to make money on people betting, right? So they want to make sure that they have the best predictions of outcomes so they make profit on bets. So looking at this kind of data, for me, you know, is really important. It's the best projection models you got, because you're kind of relying on, well, you're kind of using the bookies, millions of pounds they spend on these algorithms to help yourself with FPL. So just a quick canter, I guess, through the fixtures. Man United, Southampton. Man United 31% to keep a clean sheet, 1.95 predicted goals. I'll just go through the top kind of numbers here. There might be some that I missed, but you know, they're on screen if you want to go through them yourself. Crystal Palace, 2 projected goals against Leicester with a 36% chance of keeping a clean sheet. Liverpool, 2.8 projected goals against Forest with a 46% chance of keeping a clean sheet. Villa, 2.15 projected goals, 40% clean sheet odds. Arsenal, Tottenham, I round up, so 1.5 goals is probably 2 goals, and Arsenal, so, you know, projected outcome of that sort of 2-1, 2-2 to Arsenal. Brighton, 2.4 projected goals, 42% clean sheet odds. Man City, 2.95 goals, 46%. Chelsea, around 2 goals, and the same with Newcastle as well. So I've just counted through the highlights there. Feel free to pause the video and get a view for yourself. I really like to use clean sheet odd data to decide which defenders I want to start. And I'd usually say anything below sort of 30%, I'd be uncomfortable starting defenders at, if that makes sense. So Man United defenders, Crystal Palace defenders, Liverpool, Villa, Brighton, Man City. I think that's probably it for 30% and around. Yeah, those are the teams I'd be relatively comfortable starting defenders from. I won't spend too long on this because this is basically a carbon copy of the data you've just seen, but just organised by team rather than fixtures. So yeah, you get an idea. 2 top teams to keep a clean sheet being Man City and Liverpool. And then, yeah, they're both also the top teams for projected goals. So a good idea of the kind of players you should probably be looking at captaining or buying for this game week. I also just wanted to have a look at some Drafthound data, which is the individual player's likelihood of scoring or getting an assist. So here we've got Haaland, 66% chance of scoring versus Brentford. Anything over 50, of course, suggests that he's more likely than not to score a goal. So, I mean, that looks pretty good, doesn't it? Salah, 44, Jota, 40. Watkins, if he's fit, is 40. Palmer at 36. Isak, 35. Luis Diaz, 35. Welbeck, Mateta, and Jackson are your top players for chances of scoring. And then in terms of assists, it looks like De Bruyne, Salah, Fernandes, Eze, Haaland, Palmer, Trent, Doku, Grealish, and Bernardo Silva. Obviously, I've highlighted Doku there because I'm not 100% sure he plays this week. I think Savinho, if that's the correct pronunciation and name for that Man City right winger, and obviously Foden being back in the fray, I think there's a real chance that one of those could start in his position. Doku doesn't play. But yeah, those are your top players for a chance of an assist. And then finally, I just wanted to do a quick counter through the best expected points algorithms that I like to use to define basically the top players for projected points of the week for a captain. So Drafthound have Haaland as the top player for expected points for game week 4, 10.6 versus Salah at 9.4. So obviously they are suggesting that Haaland is the best captain. FPL Review, another source which is really popular amongst analytic managers in FPL. Haaland again, 1 point above Salah, 8.1 versus 7.1 in terms of that captaincy. So suggests to me that Haaland is the best captain. And the Fantasy Football Hub also has Haaland as the best captain. 8.7 predicted points versus 8.4 for Salah. That's obviously a little bit closer than the other ones that we've seen. But, you know, all 3 expected points algorithms that I like to use and rely upon all have Haaland as the top player. So for me, the captain is quite clear. All right, and that's the end of the video. Tried to give you all the best relevant information I could think of and put together there for a little Game Week 4 preview. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a like rating. Let me know in the comments what you think of some of those projections and odds, etc. I'll be going live tomorrow afternoon, doing a bit of a roundup of all the press conference news, etc. Discussing the Game Week 4, but discussing Game Week 4, basically answering your questions, showing you my team and my plans, etc. And then I'll go live for the deadline at 8 AM Saturday morning. So got plenty more content coming from me ahead of Game Week 4. So if you want to stick around and see that, you can subscribe to the Golden Goal channel, which should be there on your screen. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.